Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for a new PB&J video. And today is the next in my series of Paint With Me Christmas cards featuring my favorite no-line watercolor look with Penny Black's gorgeous new Christmas stamps. And here is a look at the card we'll be creating today. And this features this stunning, really unique sort of framed stamp 40-803 Winter Blooms, and the sentiment on this card is from 30-873 Happy and Bright. So off camera, before I started painting this in, I went ahead and stamped this using Memento Desert Sand ink onto Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. I stamped the sentiment with archival ink in the color of acorn. And now I'm just taking a Pitt Artist pen in black with the very small tiny journaling tip. And I'm just coloring over or sketching on top of some of these lines and these details that I wanted to be darker than the Desert Sand Memento ink. This is a waterproof marker, and so I can add it and then do all of my painting. Now, like I said, this stamp is really unique because it sort of has this built-in rectangular frame with part of the image overlapping and falling within it. And so I stamped this onto a 5x7 card, and I'm going to go ahead and first paint the background, making it darker, sort of a darker vintage brown, closer to that rectangle, and then moving it out to a lighter color. And I feel like this just instantly gives this one layer card some depth, almost like it could even be a window that you're looking through. And you could do this with lots of different color schemes. I think that would be really beautiful. Now I'm using Distress Ink re-inkers used as watercolors, and also just a little bit of gouache paint here and there with the Distress Ink re-inkers used as watercolors. Now I do have a whole video for you with more information about the exact colors in my palettes, the papers I'm using, paintbrushes, and sort of my getting ready to paint process, where I prep things in an assembly line style so I can really maximize my time and enjoyment of the stamping and painting. And I will link that video for you down in the description box below, so be sure to check that out if you have any questions. Also, in that YouTube description box below, I have listed and linked for you the Penny Black products that I am using on this card specifically. So you can see here I'm just continuing to paint and going around this border. I am first picking up with my paintbrush the Stress Ink re-inker, and I'm putting that down where I want it to be the darkest. And then I sort of spread that out with the paintbrush. Then I go back, rinse off my paintbrush, pat it onto a paper towel, and when it's just slightly damp, then I can go in and sort of blend that out into the white area near the edge of the card. So I'm just kind of blending that out then with the water that is within my paintbrush, sort of around those edges. Next up, I'm going to begin working on the leaves. And so I'm using that same process where I pick up mostly just re-inker ink on my brush, put it where I want it to be the darkest, which for these leaves is typically closest to the flower petals, or if there's any leaves that overlap, the one on the bottom will be darker where they are overlapping. Then I rinse off the paintbrush, pat it dry on that paper towel. It's not completely dry, but it's just damp, and then I can blend out that with just the water on the paintbrush. This leaves me with the darkest color and the most ink where I want it to be the darkest. Now, if you find that your colors are really blending into each other, you might want to skip around. So do like one leaf, leave one white that's right next to it, and then do the next leaf. And then as things dry, you can move back and paint the other ones. I just was not getting things too wet, so I didn't feel like they were blending into each other too much. So I was able to work on three consecutively there together. Now I did the larger leaves with that more olive colored green, that's the peeled paint Distress Ink re-inker. And now for these other sort of leaves, I'm going to do Evergreen Bough Distress Ink re-inker, which is just more of a turquoise look. And that just adds some more variation to the card, but still keeps it with the traditional Christmas colors. Once those were dry, I decided I wanted to just darken up a few of those areas just to make things look even more sort of 3D, so those darkest shadow areas there. And I am using the Arteza gouache paint to do that. Now this paint is pretty opaque, and so it really darkens that up and adds a lot of depth to the image. Now I did have a little too much water on my brushes for that, so I would recommend if you are going to do that, probably dry your brush pretty much to dry, or even switch to like a detail brush that doesn't hold quite as much water as these silver black velvet brushes that I'm using for the rest of the painting. And again, more information about the brushes are in that introductory video that I've linked down below for you. So I'm going to begin working on the petals. I'm using a brighter red and then dropping in just a little bit darker red towards the center of the flower, and also again if the petal is overlapped by another petal, any area that would sort of be tucking underneath will go a little bit darker to create a shadow and make the petals look more dimensional. I'm so sorry here, this is a little bit off camera or way up at the top of the frame. Sometimes I just get to painting with these videos and I forget that I'm recording, and I don't realize that I've sort of moved my paper till I look up and go, oh no. So I apologize for that. Now for this petal where neither side of it is really going under another petal, I just put the darkest color towards the middle and then leave the edges more of a lighter white. So you can see there it's darkest towards the middle, and then the two petals that are next to it will look more like they are going underneath it. I hope that makes sense. And I can layer more color right on top of there while it's still wet, and it'll sort of very easily blend and move together. And here I thought, oh, I better darken this up so it gets more of a look like it's going under that other petal. So I'm just adding a little more shading there as I go. And you can see there, I did leave just a little bit of white on the edge of that petal, and that again helps it really look like it's popping up and on top of the other petal. And you can see on some of these petals where I did sort of skip around so that I wasn't working on two right next to each other. Sometimes I did if it wasn't too wet, but if it was, I just sort of skipped over to the next one. I'm just going to continue with that process for the other flower. And now once it is dry, I'm going to add a little bit of gouache paint. I'm actually picking up an orange. When these dried, I felt like they looked a little too burgundy for me. I wanted them to be more vibrant. So I'm mixing that gouache paint with water, just sort of painting on the top. And since it's an orange, I find when it's sort of reblending with the colors beneath, it's bringing them more to life than they were looking to me before. And you can really see the difference in that from the flower on the left to the flower on the right here before I add that orange. I did like sort of the highlighting and the looseness that the original or the first round gave it, but I just wanted it to be brighter. Just personal preference. And I'm going to use that gouache paint to go in and paint the berries here. I love that these berries are not so tiny that they're hard to paint. I don't worry about doing any shading on each berry themselves. I just add some variations of reds to berries, especially those that are right next to each other, to differentiate between each different berry. I'm even going to add sort of a peach color for these as well. I like the gouache paints for this. Just again, I like the opacity of those and sort of the mix of the watercolor look for some of the painting, and then the flatter look of the gouache for some other parts like the berries. And it's also very forgiving. You can paint right over if you go out of the lines, you can just paint right over the top of them because it's pretty opaque and nobody even knows you went out of the lines. And finally, I'm adding just an even darker, almost like a deep red color. And again, the exact colors that are in my different palettes are all listed in that video that I'm linking for you down in the description box below. Here I have just a green Pitt Artist pen to trace over these stems. My hand is a lot steadier. I've said this before, but my hand just feels a lot steadier when I'm using a pen than a paintbrush. So I like to use that for the very fine details. And the card is complete. It's just ready to be added to a card base. I sure hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and make sure that you're subscribed to our channel so you don't miss future videos. There are more using the same technique but with some new stamps. And you can also connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, our website, and blog, and I'll link all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. Happy stamping!